Pleasure to welcome today's expert, David, to talk about mental health and importance of it. He has been featured in plenty of really high-level articles and magazines such as Wired, Forbes, Business Insider, and Elle, Men's Health. David is also a serial entrepreneur and investor and have plenty of experience on being a founder and entrepreneur. So he's not just talking about the psychological things and mental stuff. He also understands the journey of a founder, which is really important for us. And that's why it's really good to have you here, David. Really appreciate it. Thank you for joining, everyone. And I'm going to leave the floor to you, David. Thanks for jumping in.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. I'm really humble and grateful for the opportunity to speak today here and meet all of your entrepreneurs and share my learning so far on my entrepreneurial journey. So I will go into screen share here so I can share my presentation. So, all right, so Sebastian put it very well and basically summarized a little bit about my background. So based on that, I could say that I'm currently CEO and co-founder of Remente. We're a mental health and well-being app for individuals and organizations. And as you might have noticed lately, and maybe even experienced yourself, mental health has has become quite a hot topic in the spotlight, specifically also due to the ongoing pandemic we're facing, which I will go in through in a bit why that is. But we actually started this idea about 10 years ago. And I can tell you that almost up until this point, it has been an uphill battle. So I'm very well familiar with all the struggles and strains of being an entrepreneur and the toll it takes on you both physically and mentally. And I've been working as entrepreneurs since more or less 2005, co-founding different companies within e-commerce, nanotechnology, and now mobile apps. So I've seen the journey from different aspects, being bootstrapped, being venture funded, and something in between. And I'll be happy to share my learnings with you guys today. And if you have any questions during my talk related to any of the slides or something I'm saying, feel free to just interrupt me and we'll take it from there. So a little bit of background. So as I mentioned, I started my entrepreneurial journey a little more than 15 years ago, and I love entrepreneurship. It's when I started my first business, it was actually like I've come home finally. I have a background with a business and a law degree, but that didn't really that wasn't what got me going. It was the ability to and the holistic approach you have as an entrepreneur, working with so many different things that I really was intrigued about, and how you actually are mentally pushing the boundaries of what is possible continuously, and do things that you previously wouldn't think you would be able to do. Like your first day, you might ask, how will I get my first customers? And then a couple of years down, you have hundreds of customers and you don't even reflect upon it. So that's actually a very interesting perspective on how your mental barriers are shifting as an entrepreneur. At the same time, I would consider entrepreneurship as the extreme sports of business management. There are a lot of uncertainties. You always have less resources than what you have ambitions. You always have a lack of time, money, people, etc., and you're doing things that maybe never have been done before. So it's really, really tough. And for me, it got to a point where I realized that, okay, maybe I'm not doing so well when I realized that, okay, what's the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning? And what's the last thing I think about before going to bed? In my case, it was work, and not that I was, whoa, I got this amazing startup job and I'm living my dream. It was a lot of anxiety, stress, worry connected to my situation, because, how I'm going to pay myself or my employees in 2 months from now. I mean, it's a natural stress to that, which I guess many of you could relate to. So that actually got so far. So one day my wife told me and said, well, maybe you should go see a psychologist. And my first reaction to that was, wait a minute, I'm not crazy, you know, I'm trying to become a successful entrepreneur. If I would go to a psychologist, that would be like admitting defeat, that I cannot cope with the entrepreneurship lifestyle, coping with the pressures of working around the clock, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? That was my belief at the time. And that made me end up in a very, very bad place. And what I hope here today is to hopefully be able to give you some insights, ideas, some actual hacks that hopefully could prevent you from making the same mistakes that I did, which will in turn have the benefits that you will lead a much more balanced, healthy, and productive life with a more successful business. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve with you guys today, and look forward to your feedback on this. So with that said, I just want to start with a little bit of an outlook here. If we look at the current state of affairs in the world, some people could argue that things are not looking too positive. For the past almost 2 years, we've had a global epidemic or pandemic. Also, we have this environmental concern that is looming upon us. I heard the other week that 2050, the world will go under. Then we live in an information society with a continuous flow of distractions and services and people craving our constant attention, which puts a lot of stress on our brains. So this is really not an optimal situation for us mentally to be in many aspects. And you know, recently we have the very tragic developments in Afghanistan. I didn't put that on it, but you know, there are a lot of things coming on to us, thrown at us every day, that we need to deal with, both from a practical day-to-day perspective, but also from an existential perspective. And if we take that down into mental health, if we look at mental health conditions, they're actually globally today the #1 cause of sick leave. And what we are facing currently, we have one pandemic we're talking a lot about, which I guess you all can relate to, which is the obvious one here, COVID-19. But we have been having an ongoing pandemic related to our minds, which is basically the issue of mental health conditions, which has been going on for quite some time. Before the pandemic, it was estimated that mental health issues globally cost about 2.5 trillion US dollars per year. It's the #1 cost of sick leave, and by 2030, the World Health Organization estimates that the depression will be the #1 global burden of disease. Add to this the pandemic, where this has actually accelerated this issue. So we have a monumental, gigantic, ongoing disaster when it comes to how we are managing our minds globally. And the thing is that it doesn't really need to be that way if you understand how your brain works and work with it instead of against it, which I'll go into in a bit. So you guys might figure, well, I'm an entrepreneur, you know, I'm actually the master of my own destiny. I'm building really cool future stuff that will change the world and make things and my life for the better. So this kind of mental health stuff, you know, that doesn't really relate to me. Well, there was actually a Berkeley researcher that did a study on entrepreneurs showing that they are 50% more likely to have a mental health condition. Of the group of entrepreneurs that they've interviewed in the United States, about 72% of them were having some kind of mental health condition. They were more likely to be depressed, 6 times more likely to have ADHD, suffer from substance abuse, etc., etc. So being an entrepreneur, or the people that actually go into the field of entrepreneurship, have a higher tendency of suffering from mental health conditions, which means that for an entrepreneur, if you look at that, the background and also the environment you're in, it's extra important to take care of your mental well-being and health. So I've been talking a lot about the, you know, negative things and the situation at hand, where we have a mental health crisis that also many thanks now to the pandemic, is spiraling out of control. So everything looks bleak and bad, right? Well, maybe there's a way to prevent all this. And if there was, what would you do? So that's what we're gonna go into right now. In the meantime, what would be great is if people that are in this call could express if they have had any kind of mental health conditions. And of course, I say that this with the utmost respect. If you don't want to talk about this or mention this, it's fully okay. But if you you are okay with communicating about having faced mental health conditions of some sort, it's actually one of the most important things of preventing mental health conditions, both for yourself and others, to talk about this, because this has and is related to a very big stigma, which has resulted to that people don't talk about this. And that's also why we see that, you know, you haven't, if you look at suicides, about 3 times as many people take their lives in Sweden every year than die in traffic. So, and you also see overrepresentation among men. And one of the theories is that, okay, men don't talk about emotions and voice their concerns or ventilate as much as women do. So talking about this, acknowledging this, both as a founder or a person in a team, or just showing this to the person next to you, is super important. Because statistically, if we look at mental health conditions, about 50% of everyone during their lifetime will face them directly or indirectly. So talking about this is a really great first step of addressing it, which will help you as a person, and definitely people in your team, in your environment and surroundings. So how do we work with our mental health and well-being in a different way that helps us improve our quality of life? Well, there's a way to work with this, and it relates to the 1.3 kilo of mass that we have in between our ears, which is also known as the brain. So if we use our brain the right way, the cool thing is that we will not only be less stressed, we will also be more productive. But the thing is that we have an old brain that lives in a very modern world, and our old brain wasn't really designed for the modern world that we live in today. So we need to understand how the brain works, how it acts. We often think that we're so smart and logical, but that's not always the case. So you probably see the picture here. So you can see the brain, and you could divide it into 2 parts. One which we call the modern brain, and then we have the old brain, which is the other part. So in the modern brain, that's where we have the ability to think logically. We can set goals, have visions, which actually makes us unique as human beings as compared to other mammals. So that's where we have our thinking mechanisms. And we often think that that is what runs the show, our thinking brain, because we, you know, I think, therefore I am. But then we have the survival mechanisms of the brain, which are about 10 times as old as our thinking mechanisms, about 2 million years old. That's where we have the fight and flight or mechanisms, and also what is often referred to as the reptile brain. So I just want to give you an example on what happens when we get into the survival mechanisms of the brain. So let's say that you are in a hurry to get to work. You're already, you know, 10 minutes late, and you're in your home, apartment, or house, and you can't find your phone. Where is my phone? So you run around the apartment everywhere. Where's my phone? Where's my phone? If you have family or significant other, you might start blaming them. Have you seen my phone? Did you put it away? It was here. And you run around for 10 minutes, and this is all you're looking for, and suddenly you feel this pocket vibration. Well, it's in my pocket. Okay, it was there all the time. So this is what happens when we end up in a stressful situation. our old part of the brain takes over. It's very simplistic from that perspective, and it's just focusing on fight or flight, not thinking or reflecting. So that's a typical situation of what happens when we go into a sudden stressful situation. We stop to think, we are more in reaction mode. So what happens is that all blood goes from the brain into our veins. We prepare for either to run or to fight. And why is that the case? It's illogical, right? If we would just deal with this in another way, it would be much better. Thinking about this, or where did I put my phone the last time? Can it be in my pockets? It's usually in my pockets or at the desk. We don't go through that process because these old parts of the brain, they are so old and so strong compared to the more logical thinking parts of it. And then you might ask yourself, so why is that? Why survival mechanisms? Why are they important? Why do we get into stress? Because today it can seem kind of counterproductive. Well, the thing with stress is it is a survival mechanism originally. So it helps us survive when we encounter danger. For instance, it could be a enemy tribe or a animal, something. Then the body prepared to either fight for your life or run for your life. So stress originally is a very, very good thing for us, because if it wasn't for stress, none of us would be sitting here. That's the same with fear, for instance. The people that wasn't really afraid or cautious or had some amount of worry built in, they could see a lion and say, whoa, that's a cute animal, I'm gonna go and cuddle with it. Those guys aren't with us anymore. So that's called Darwinism. So all these emotions that we might be experiencing that we might feel be illogical, they actually do make sense. But in today's society, they have difficulties to adapt. That's why we see a bit of a clash between the old brain and the old system that helped us survive in our modern world today. So if we know that this is the case and we understand that this is the way the brain works, we can start to work with it instead of against it. So basically what we usually say is that we have two brains driving our behavior. The Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman talked about system 1 and system 2. So it's of course only one brain, but when describing this, it's much more easy to make this understandable. So what we talk about normally is that we have the logical brain, which is the younger part of the brain, where we can think, we can be rational, etc. We can plan things, think abstract, have visions, and so forth. And that's also what we would like to refer as our conscious mind, because we're thinking. That's our conscious. Then we have the emotional part of the brain, which is about 10 times as old and helped us survive back in the day to become what we are today. That's also where we have the fight and flight mechanisms. We have something called the limbic system. That's where we have memories. That's where we also have emotions. So they're stored more or less in the same place. And that's the part of the unconscious brain. So we think that the conscious logical brain is running the show, but really it's the unconscious part, based on our experience, what we have, our beliefs, and what's happened in our lives up until this point. Because the brain is designed to always take the shortcut to basically the path of least resistance, to preserve energy and help us survive. So that's why we go back into old ways and habits often, even if they're not good for us, because it's the simplest way for the brain to go ahead. So I'm just going to take an example on how powerful the limbic system could be, where we both have emotions, where we have memories. So Sebastian, I have a question for you.
Go for it.
Do you remember 9/11?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you heard about 9/11, do you remember where you were?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
At
where
home.
were you? You were at home. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was 20 years ago.
Yeah. I remember very clearly that day when I watched TV and the news and yeah. I was sitting in a sofa hearing, it was
Yeah.
Felt like yesterday.
So what were you doing exactly, let's say, 1 week ago at this time? You,
Probably running after my son and saying, "Don't touch that."
yeah. So what I did here was I was speaking to Sebastian's limbic system, where he, could recall a situation 20 years back, but what he did a week ago or maybe yesterday is much more vague. This is because I was talking to his limbic system, where we have memories, where we have emotions, and when they are combined, it creates something that sticks with us. So that's why many people, if they were old enough, they remember things such as 9/11. So there are some pivotal moments in our lives where that are heavily emotional to us. We remember those. And that's what happened with people that are suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, if you've heard about it. So what happens in those cases is that, let's say there's a person that suffers from PTSD and they almost drowned at one occasion when they were out with their boat. So for them today, it could be enough that they are seeing water. They could see a lake or a puddle of water, and they start to feel anxiety. The logical part of the brain knows that, well, this is ridiculous. I'm not even close to drowning. But the emotional part of the brain, those systems are so strong that they take over. This is also what happens if, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you say something to someone, they did something, and you get frustrated or mad. And Sebastian, I don't know if you ever told your kids something that you then realize, maybe I shouldn't said that, or it's a colleague you think, you motherfucker, and then some voice in your brain says, maybe that wasn't so smart. Maybe you shouldn't told that people that, or I don't know if that has happened to any of you here, but what's happened, there's once again the logical and emotional parts of the brain are fighting against each other. And the emotional part, this is what Daniel Kahneman talked about, system 1, system 2, where one is much more quicker than the other. It's more intuitive, instinctive, and older. So it comes before, and then we say, well, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And this is what creates a lot of conflicts and issues in relationships, in businesses, etc. Because we rely so much on the logical part of the brain. We believe this is what runs the show, but it really isn't. So once we understand this, we unlock the true potential of the brain to understand that these systems interact. And when we work with them and understand how they influence each other, we can actually improve our mental well-being, health, and also performance. Because the cool thing here, if we understand how the brain works and start working with it, we will not only be more happy, healthy, we will also be more productive. Because the thing with our brain, I talked about the logical brain, and there we have something called the prefrontal cortex. It needs to know where it's going. It needs direction, like going from A to B. If it doesn't know where it's going, what happens is it gets into stress and triggers the fight and flight system. So there are many cases, because if when you're going to, let's say you're going to work in a day and said, well, where are you going to work? Where is that? I don't know. I'm just walking and we'll see what happens. The brain wouldn't like that. So what we need to create for ourselves is some direction in our life. Okay, this is what's important to me. This is where I'm heading with my personal life, with my business, and what's going on around me, because that becomes tangible for the brain. Once that happens, the brain calms down. Okay, this is where we're going. And what we're seeing is that many businesses are quite bad at setting objectives and goals. They have something, but it's not really clear. And often when we go and talk with Remente that I work for, we go and talk to leadership and management teams, they can really say, what's our mission? What's our vision? What do we really want to achieve with this? If they cannot answer that, how will the rest of the organization be able to answer that? And that creates a lot of unnecessary worry and stress. So that's why it's super important to have a direction in life on all levels. And it's not that you need to know where you will be in 5 years from now, but if there's a situation that's uncertain, the way to cure uncertainty is to try to define it and establish it and say, what are we doing with this? Once that has happened, you reduce the likelihood of going into stress. And the way you do this on a daily basis is connecting your goals to your daily activities, because you have your habits, you have your certain behaviors, you have things you do every day. If they're connected to the overall goal, it will also reduce the likelihood of you going into stress, because it's like, okay, with our business, our goal to the end of the year is to, let's say we want to have 5 new clients. Okay, and we have now 5 months to get 5 clients. So it's 1 client per month we need to acquire. So what do we need to do every week? What do we need to do every day? This process needs to be set on a reasonable basis to resonate with the brain. So goal setting, I mean, you should always have these lofty, ambitious goals, but it should also be something that you believe that you'll be able to reach, because otherwise that will stress you out. So if you do that process, that will reduce the likelihood of you going into stress, because for the mind, it'll be clear, this is where we're going, and this is what I'm doing today, and this is how this is connected to where we're going. And that's what the brain likes. So by working that way, setting a direction, which is kind of a logical process, connected to everyday habits and behaviors, and also emotionally connecting to the goal, which is super important. And many businesses think about, because they have business plans, strategy plans, revenue models. How many people are actually excited about a business plan or a strategy plan or a PowerPoint presentations with the 10 commandments or values of a company? Most aren't. But if you try to explain what that would mean emotionally for people, then you create a really, really strong connection with the limbic system. So if they know this is where we're going and this is what this will feel like, how this will be emotionally at that point, that will have a tremendous effect on well-being and performance.
Jonathan, jump
Yes.
in, please.
Yeah, thanks. Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
You do. Great. Good start. Yeah, I'm just wondering about this to avoid stress by seeing the direction or seeing the goals in front of me and why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm just considering, for me, it's important to know, for example, then Scania's vision and mission, and like the very high up the goals, why we are here at work. But I guess for other people, it could be good enough to have like the sprint goal or very much shorter term goals. Is that true, or do you believe, or do the science say that everyone needs to actually see the red thread from the code some days ahead, and then also the higher purpose of what I'm doing? Or can we be different there? Or should I believe that all my colleagues need to see the red thread all the way up to Scania's vision, for example? Or, yeah, do you see my question?
Yeah, great question, Jonathan. So I'd say it's a combination here. So not, people are only concerned to what's relevant to them. And not everyone are interested in where Scania is heading 5 years from now, because they're like, okay, what matters to me, I will have a job to go to, and I will have fun at work, and I'll be able to have a great life outside of work. Maybe that's what matters to them. So the emotional connection, however, is super important here, because that's what is driving motivation, the purpose. So there needs to be a purpose, and this purpose isn't the kind of that I'm going to make Scania's shareholders richer. That would never be purpose for the general working population at the company. But they have some kind of purpose to why this is important.
So let's say that if it would be that one of my colleagues, his or her purpose is to learn much more about Java, for example. I mean, that could that be a purpose? And another colleague's purpose is to help the world with avoiding the climate crisis, and that's why they work for Scania. But they still work in the same team. Would that be? I mean, could that be the case? And is that possible to have it like that?
Yeah, it could be. Then we're also so I mean the individual purpose is also important, and the company needs to really take that into aspect. So, because if we look at what drives motivation, there are three things, according to research. It's mastery, autonomy, and purpose.
Yeah.
And so you have your own individual purpose that I really want to feel that based on my values, beliefs, expectations, I will be able to thrive as a person. But then you have the company purpose. And if you look at all the best, the most successful brands. So if we take Apple as an example, they've been able to connect both, logical arguments to why you should get an Apple, but also the emotional arguments. Because it's beautiful, it's sleek, etc. And once you combine that, you get something really, really powerful. And that helps fuel the motivation, the performance, the productivity, and also well-being of people, because they feel that, okay, I'm actually doing this because it matters. And everybody are looking for that to some aspect, and what that purpose will be different. So what I would say here is that it's important to understand what are the drivers for the individual, but the purpose of the company is also important to make it emotional. So people feel proud going to Scania every day, for instance, that we're actually doing this to change the world. It might not be the thing that really gets me going, but still, when I tell someone, so why are you doing this? Well, Scania, what we're doing is actually to make the world a better place, to use that cliche. And that will instill a sense of pride in people. And so once there's a connection between what I do and a meaning to it, a purpose to it, that's where the power lies, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks.
We have 15 minutes left.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. So basically, the thing I wanted to summarize here is that if we start to work with the brain, so the thing that helps us stress less, such as having a direction or purpose, makes us also more productive. So this is our actually two sides of the same coin. Traditionally in a business, you say, well, okay, we're only, what matters are the results, revenues, performance of people. But the key to achieving that is also taking care of the well-being of yourselves, of your employees, of your teams. Because once they have that, they'll be able to perform better. And when you look at well-being today, if we look at science, Gallup recently did a study of over 100 million people. It's not just well-being at work, it's also outside of work. Because today, it's very difficult to differentiate work from your personal life. I mean, it will all be mishmashed and interconnected in our connected society. So as an employer and as an entrepreneur, it's important to look at the whole picture from a holistic perspective. All right. So with that said, that was a bit of theory. So what I want us to do right now is actually get a bit tangible to give you guys a number of brain hacks that you hopefully can use in your lives to both improve productivity and your well-being and your mental health. So 3 different hacks we will go through. The first one are 6 different steps to help you stress less. All right. So we talked about stress briefly previously, and which originally is a good thing because it's a survival mechanism, which isn't that bad. The problem today is that the things that trigger stress in our modern society can appear, the stress triggers could appear 50 to 100 times per day, as opposed to 5 to 10 times per day, 200,000 years ago. So this is somewhat of an issue. And often you talk about negative and positive stress. So there are different ways of stress, but stress is stress. So to understand what stress does to you, is you could think of yourself as a battery. So when you stress, you are depleting the battery level. So if you continuously stress without recovery or recharge, you will eventually go down to 0. And that's when people have problems getting out of bed. And once you're in that situation, it's obviously not good. Then you go into a burnout or depression and so forth. So it's really, really important to try to prevent this. And there are some scientific ways to do this. The paradox here is once we are stressed, we tend not to prioritize those aspects, but we do less of them, which in turn makes us more stressed. So I will go with these 6 steps to help you stress less, according to science. So they are basically, they're kind of obvious things, but it's always important to know them, and they actually have a very detrimental effect on your well-being. So sleep is one of them. So in general, we need a lot of sleep, preferably 8 hours per night. I think there are about 6% of the population that actually could function and perform better on less than 7-8 hours of sleep per night, but it's 6% of the population. The rest of us are actually starting to degrade our performance when we get too little sleep. And when it comes to sleep, it might be that we think that, okay, I need to sleep 8 hours. If I didn't sleep at 8 hours, it's bad. Well, it's not really the case, but the important thing is to have sleep routines. We have something called the circadian rhythm, which helps us wake up and go to sleep. So having a set time, more or less, where you go to sleep, and a set time where you get up will help you to establish a certain circadian rhythm, which makes it more easily to go into deep sleep.
A what rhythm?
Circadian rhythm.
What's that?
And so that's basically our sleep rhythm that helps us sleep. And there are a number of things we could do to improve sleep. So just before going into bed, we should wind down. So if we could just turn lights down, reduce screen time. Might be hard for some, but take your phone or computer in night mode, because you don't want to. What happens is that before going into sleep, 1 to 2 hours before, the brain goes into rest mode. So if we do things like work until we get to sleep, the brain goes up into work mode again, and we start, thinking, analyzing, and we start spinning. So that makes it much more difficult for us to fall asleep. So one of the things one of my heavy recommendations here is never check emails in bed. I don't know if anyone of you ever did that. Probably not, but if you did, strong recommendation is to stop that, because what happens is that the best case would be not to bring this thing into bed, but we have to be realistic here. And so if you check mails before you, let's say you're lying in your bed and you're looking at social media, or maybe reading a book, watching a series, which all of those things could actually, apart from reading, are things that are getting your brain up into work mode again. But let's say, okay, I'm just going to check my emails. And then you go and see your emails, and you see that email, that thing that, that task that you've been procrastinating for, the past week or two, and the person that is eagerly waiting for your response. And it's like, oh, no, not that. I'm supposed to go to sleep right now, so I won't deal with this now. But it sticks with you in your unconscious, and what will happen then is that you will stop worrying, thinking about this, and you'll fall asleep late. And what happens when you wake up? Oh, that email, I didn't respond to that, or that task. Oh, so this is why it's so important for us to, when we prioritize sleep, to not interfere with the sleep pattern. So try really to wind down. Try, if you are having your phone in bed, I actually ended up at a point where I started to remove social media, because I was so distracted by it, and always checking social media while I was in bed, which actually got my brain up into work mode again. So I actually removed those apps for a while. Then I brought them back, and then I had a much more healthy relationship to them. And I nowadays I only read on my phone in bed, and I have to be really strict about it, because if I start watching Netflix, I find it much more difficult falling asleep. So sleep is super important. Well, it's a no-brainer. Exercise also super important for us. Sorry, because it helps our.
We have.
Sorry. Okay, 5 minutes. I'll run. So exercise is also very important, because it helps us manage all the stress hormones, creates dopamines, endorphins. It's If you could make exercise into a pill, that would be the best seller. It's one of the simplest, the most efficient things you could do to improve your mental health and well-being and reduce stress. Third thing, social interaction, relationships, super important as well. And there's a reason to that, because our brain is social. It's one of our survival mechanisms. Back in the day, when we were at, living in caves or on the savannah, our, apart from stressing, which was a survival mechanism, we survived in a group because together we were strong. We could find nutrition, shelter, we could protect ourselves. So if we would be excluded from a group, that would in principle be like being sent to death. That's why exclusion today at school, in social relationships, at work, feels so horrible to us because it's like being sent to death. So being in a social context actually helps us from a stress perspective. So social relationships are good for us. Fourth aspect is taking short breaks throughout the day. It's a small, efficient, quick way to actually work with our recharging the battery I showed you, so we don't get down to zero where we're totally drained. So that's something that's also really important. And mindfulness, meditation, you probably heard a lot about it. It's also very important because you practice in being present in the moment, which is so opposed to everything else we're doing on a daily basis. So it's really, really great brain training. And the last part is direction, goal setting, which we addressed quite a bit previously. So these 6 aspects are scientifically shown to help you stress less. The paradox is when we get into a stressful situation, we tend to think, well, sleep, well, I have to meet the deadline, so I don't have time to sleep. Exercise, no way, because, I have to meet the deadline, Social relationships, well, how can I meet people? I'm working, I have to work around the clock here. Breaks, no breaks. Mindfulness, meditation, forget about it. Well, direction, we'll take that later. So often when you're in your most stressful situation, you should do the opposite of what your impulse is telling you. So make sure to focus on sleep, make sure to actually plan time for exercise, even if it's just taking the stairs for 5 minutes, and also some kind of social relationship, because that will help you also perform better at the end of the day. So on to hack number 2, how you could get more stuff done, or shit done, if you may. So talked about goals, which are great, but it could be, very fuzzy, not so tangible. So the thing with goal setting, and when you want to start a new habit or behavior to get stuff done, start super small, super easy. It's like, okay, I'm going to start running. Okay, maybe your first step on your route to be, run a marathon is buying a pair of shoes. I mean, might sound ridiculous, but those small wins, what helps us build confidence in our progress and behavioral change. And that's a very big part of positive psychology. Focus on the things you can do as opposed to the things you can't do or are difficulties. That's how you could build up your goal to something great. And when you have your goals, this is also something we just addressed to, okay, you have these big goals or your company goals or what you want to do with your life, connect them to your daily to-do list. What are you doing on a daily basis? Often we have to-do lists, but they're only reactive lists on things we must do. I have to take that meeting, I have to go shop groceries, pick up the kids or whatever. But if you connect that to what's important in the long term, you're now talking to the prefrontal cortex here in the brain, and that calms the brain down and makes it more focused and productive. And when you're prioritizing things, use the 80-20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle. There's a saying that 80% of your revenues comes from 20% of your customers. So this is about, at the end of the day, it's not about 80-20, but it's about leverage. So really, when you focus your activities and prioritizing, focus on the things that, if possible, requires least efforts, but have results in maximum output. And often this means that you need to take the most boring, most important things, which are often the most boring things, first in your day, because otherwise you will procrastinate them. You'll check your emails because it's easy, it's fast, it really resonates with the dopamine system in the brain, checking things off, wow, and you feel important, but is that really important? So when you're prioritizing, look at the things that are really important, and do the, as we would say in Sweden, the sourdoughs, the difficult things. Do them first in the day, and then you can, you can forget about it, because otherwise it will be nagging you here, and you have to do this, and then you just procrastinate. So not a good way. And last but not least, don't multitask. Our brain is not a parallel processor like you have in your laptop or desktop. It only can process one thing at a time. There are people like pilots that are great at switching from one task to another, but most of us aren't. So if we are working on something, we get distracted by a phone call, phone or a notification or email, it in general takes us 20 minutes to get back into the previous tasks fully focused, because our brain isn't designed to do many things at once. So that was the second hack. I'm running quickly now into the third hack, and that's how you can master motivation, which is a very, very important part on your journey to mental well-being, because it will be tough, and it's specifically tough if you're an entrepreneur with, very little resources, time, and money. So one of the things to help you more to be motivated when goal setting, I already talked about, is actually important, not only from a performance perspective, but also from a well-being perspective, because it resonates with the brain. So when you set goals for yourself, make them SMART. And SMART is an abbreviation of specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So if you go through that process, it will be more tangible for you and your brain to grasp this, and it will be easier to plan. So often an advice I have, if you have a lot of things to do, just write them down, or there's a goal plan, write the things down. It's like, okay, I want to go skiing this winter. Because you love skiing, but then you just think about it, you're not acting upon it. So what you could do is, okay, skiing, when, with whom, how, etc. Just point that down, and then it will, you will feel an instant calm in your mind, because it becomes clear to you what you need to do to get to that thing that is important to you. And that has a positive influence on your motivation. Also, when doing this, you need to trick your mind, you need to be patient, and you need to be kind to yourself, because I showed you the earlier picture of the brain. I'm talking about the two brains. So you have the old emotional part of the brain that really wants to take the shortcuts to instant gratifications. It's, logically, we know what kind of behaviors and actions are good for us in the long term, but emotionally, we're only here and now. That's why when we feel that, okay, I really should work on that, business plan, but, there are popcorn, there's Netflix, I could always do that tomorrow, working on the business plan, because we're, our brains, they crave dopamine, and they really want to have these instant gratification highs. And we have a whole, our whole economy, from Netflix to sweets to everything around us, is built upon channeling and tapping into that instant gratification mechanisms. So it's super tough today to change behaviors. We have a lot of things going against us. So what you can do when you're doing things that that are good for you in the long term, but you won't feel the effect immediately, is to start tricking your mind. So one thing is, let's say that, okay, you want to go for a morning jog every morning, or a morning yoga, and you wake up in the morning and you feel like, yoga, no, I'll just snooze another 15 or 30 minutes, and you're not really there. So what you could do is you could establish mental cues in your, so let's say when you get up, you suddenly see the yoga mat and your gym clothes, and so that sends a mental cue. Don't start thinking, because then we start questioning your choice. Instead, it's like, okay, yoga mat, clothes, just put them on, and then you're there doing it. So that's one thing, to trick your mind in creating mental cues that will help you to behaviors that will be good for you in the long term, but you cannot feel how they instantly will help you. Another thing is also social, that if you do activities, for instance, sports, do it with a friend, because you might let yourself down, but you won't let the friend down, because you don't do that from a social perspective. And you need to be patient to yourself in your process. Let's say that say that now I'm going to go 10 days without eating chocolate. I love chocolate. Personally, I actually love chocolate. So I'd say not going to eat chocolate for 10 days. I managed 9 days, and then the 10th day, I go to Liseberg here in Göteborg, the amusement fair where I live, and I play on the kind of tumble of wheels, and I win a big chunk of chocolate, 2 kilos. So of course I couldn't withstand the desire of getting a bite. So I ate on day 10. Would you guys consider me a failure?
No.
Well,
Good enough.
I'm happy to see that you see it that way. Well, and I tend to agree with you, even if I wouldn't feel like that way. So what I would feel in that situation, I failed. Nothing matters. I suck, so I can continue eating even more chocolate than before every day from now on going forwards. But I was actually a 90% success. I was a 10% failure in that case. I did 9 out of 10 days, but we don't think like that because we're just here and now. So when we want to establish behavioral change, it's really not about if we have a relapse or we there's a week when we didn't exercise. The key is to not quit, to jump back into the saddle, up on the horse, and continue riding. That's what really helps us in the long term. And when we're doing things that we know are good for our behavior, think of it, I'm actually, if it's exercise, I'm doing this for life. So if I have a 1 month now, 1 week where I don't exercise, doesn't matter. What matters is what happens in the long run. But our mind will be just focused on the here and now, won't see this. So you shouldn't just rationalize with yourself, but just like plan, okay, I'm going back to the gym tomorrow again, and I'm not going to think, I'm just going to do it. So it's very important to be kind and understand in this situation, be kind to yourself and be patient when you want to establish behavioral change. And one thing to do that when it comes to instant gratifications are direct rewards. So let's say if you are you have an important job assignment to do that you've been pushing, procrastinating, and then you say, whoa, there's a new Rick and Morty episode that just came out that I want to watch on HBO. Well, so what you could do then is say, okay, I'm not now going to work for half an hour, and then I'll reward myself with that Rick and Morty episode. Then you have an instant gratification connection to something that is good for you long term, that you do your work assignments, but don't feel the the instant high from it. Then you manage to connect those two. So direct rewards is a really, really great way of managing to improve motivation.
Thanks, David.
So with that, I'm just 1 minute and I'm done.
Got it. Go for it.
Sorry. Yeah. So with that said, I just wanted to tell all of you guys that you've been awesome to bearing with me for now. Almost 1 hour, which I know is tough for the brain, and I ran over time. So what I just wanted to actually go through with you today is that you've been going through 3 super important steps that will help you improve. You now know 6 steps to less stress. So congratulations to that. You know how to get shit done, and you now know how to master motivation. So what I would like all of you to do, I cannot see everyone, but I would like all of us to applaud ourselves for doing this. So that's a small example of a direct reward. Not as good as chocolate or a Rick and Morty episode, but it's still something. So that was more or less what I wanted to share with you guys here today. And I know we're running over time, but if there are any questions, feel free to shoot.
We have like another 7 minutes for questions. I'm gonna launch a poll right now. It's just some feedback questions for us, so if everybody could answer those. Regarding the last question where we ask which content you would like to see in the future, if you have any other suggestions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And then I have a question for you, David.
Yeah.
Don't you think that a certain amount of stress is needed in order to actually perform in a proper way, whether it's job, school, whatever?
Sure, definitely. So I mean, as I mentioned, stress originally a survival mechanism. It gets us focused, and that stress. There's something called positive stress that gets us, that helps us perform during short bursts. The problem with it, is if so stress in itself, it's good or bad. It is what it is. It's a mechanism, and we need to work with it. So if we are stressing for some time, it can help us focus at times or do a lot of work during a short period of time. But it's important then to recover, because if we don't get that time of recovery, it will, deplete our energy and get us into mental trouble, basically.
I'm gonna just a quick correction. Thanks for that answer, Brudö. Good question, Kat. I'm gonna just quickly mention, since the clock is 3 p.m. and people will be leaving, I just want to say thank you everyone for joining. And if you still want to stay for a couple of minutes if you have a follow-up question for David, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I want to say thank you for today. And David, thank you so much for the insights. Really valuable.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And I think we're running out of time. I think the calendar invite said ends at 3, so that's why I think people have other things scheduled, and we're really keen on keeping the schedule for our members. I made some notes. I'm looking forward to jumping on socials and continuing the conversation in a more casual manner. So anyone who wants to join in, please do so. Let's see if we have any questions. I think we're good. Thanks, Kat, again for coordinating. Anything else? Any final words, David?
Well, I think, as you're doing something really great with running all your businesses, and make sure to take care of yourselves in that process, because you're doing this probably for the long run, and then you need to be, it's all about resilience and sustainability. So really taking care of yourself, and make sure to cherish what you have today, and look at your life from a holistic perspective. It's really important to care not only by, because you are the business here, and you'll be spending more time with your business than with anything or anyone else. So personal leadership is what really will make the difference here, and how you can manage yourself in this process from all aspects of life.
Awesome. And Kat answered. We'll share the slides, of course, and the recordings. Thanks for today, David. I'll send you a separate link for the streaming, the live streaming online. That's it for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.